Welcome to Accommodate This. My name is David, and I'm a late diagnosed autistic adult. I make video content about being a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world. And if that's something you're interested in, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. Full disclosure for this video, I'm going to be going on a bit of a rant. I will be touching on suicidal ideation, and I don't want to make things worse for anyone, so I'm telling you now that this video is packed full of emotional triggers. I'm also not directing my points at any one person. On the contrary, I'm actually going to be using generalizations just for simplicity's sake. But I know these issues that I'm going to talk about are an example of how a few bad apples can ruin the bunch. I know it's a minority of the neurotypical population that's responsible for much of what I have to say. But if you've witnessed these things and done nothing to stop them, you're also part of the problem, sorry to say. And while I was only diagnosed a few years ago, I've felt these ideas to my core for my entire life. And now that I've started this channel, I feel a sense of responsibility to put in my 2 cents about the abuses that are imposed upon autistic people every day. And honestly, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the taboo nature of the subject preventing us from making any progress toward a solution. So despite the negativity of this dark topic, my hope is that I may say something that might actually make a positive difference in the lives of people in the autistic community. And now that you know why we're here, let's get into the topic for this video: Autistiphobia. There's a stereotype that autistics are black and white thinkers, but in my experience, I've always floated around somewhere in the gray. People would either really love me or really hate me, and it's as if people would project upon me the opposite extreme in relation to wherever they stood. And part of that comes down to the fact that my reality defies their imagined expectations, and most people don't know what to make of that. I talked a bit about this in my video on mind reading, which you can watch here. Basically, they disappoint themselves by creating unrealistic expectations that never took me into consideration in the first place. And it's as if my mere existence challenges them to take another look at their mental models. I don't even have to do anything, and they'll freak out on me. But instead of reassessing their own ideologies, they retaliate against me, insisting I change myself to fit their beliefs. There's a huge autistic community on YouTube who talk about what it's like being autistic, and they're really helpful to thousands of autistics, including myself. However, I've tried to focus a lot of my videos on the neurotypical community because they make up the majority of the human population. And that's where I see the most progress can be made. My hope is that, upon seeing things from a new light, the minority of neurotypicals responsible for all the abuse and hatred toward autistics might look inward and adjust their own behaviors accordingly. Or that the majority of neurotypicals become better advocates. And I realize I may be trying to do the impossible, but that's precisely why I need to keep doing this. Because bad things are going to continue happening if we all remain silent. Problems aren't going to magically go away by ignoring them. Bigotry is a stubborn refusal to change one's opinion about a person or group of people. And you may be thinking I'm a bigot for implying that non-autistics in general are bigots, while at the same time criticizing them. But that's not what's going on here. I'm certain the majority of the majority don't even think about us at all. There's no need for them to think about the autistic community because they are privileged enough to not be affected by it. It's only a small minority of the majority who go out of their way to spread misinformation and hatred toward autistic people. And yet it's so bad that 85% of autistics are unemployed or underemployed. Those of us who are employed are relentlessly bullied or forced to hide our true selves. So before you judge me too harshly, remember that the autistic community isn't demanding that anyone hides their true self. Autistics aren't judging people for who they are. We aren't bullying and abusing people for being different. We aren't abusing our power and preventing anyone from finding work or from feeling like they have any value in this world. And I'm not expressly calling anyone a bigot or an entire neurotype bigots. But if you are doing these things, you've earned that title yourself. And I'm not going to make excuses for you. If your actions demonstrate that you fit the description of a bigot, it's not judgmental for me to use the term properly. And again, if you witness these things but choose to do nothing, you are siding with the bigots. You're not helping. And the statistics don't lie. Autistics account for less than 3% of the human population, and yet we are the most marginalized, misunderstood, misrepresented, and most disadvantaged. Our mere existence is seen as an affront to humanity. We are treated as if we are a disease that needs to be eradicated. And despite the value we bring to humanity, our contributions often are unappreciated until we're dead. Meanwhile, we are riddled with anxiety, constantly subjected to abuse, rejection, subjugation, oppression, extortion, and projection every day of our lives. If the majority wanted to absolve themselves, they could stand up with us and against the abusers. So while I'm using general language, I know it's not the majority of neurotypicals who treat us so poorly, but autistics are outnumbered, and supports from the majority are very much absent, ignorant, deaf, and blind to our struggles. I'm not only autistic, but I'm also gay. And one of the things I learned from being part of the LGBTQ community is that bigotry is fueled by ignorance. Hiding from the bigotry in order to preserve ourselves only results in more abuse and mental anguish. And it contributes to the idea that the bigots have power over us. That's why the LGBTQ community has fought so hard for visibility and accurate representation. We're tired of hiding in the shadows. We are tired of being beaten and mocked for who we love. And there's a lot from the gay rights movement that runs parallel to the autistic rights movement of today. Similar to conversion therapy designed to convert gay people into straight people through torture and extreme conditioning, electric shock, and other dehumanizing tactics, autistics are being subjected to applied behavior analysis, or ABA therapy, that strives to convert autistics into neurotypicals, proverbially forcing a square peg into a round hole and claiming progress while ignoring the damage being done. Many autistic people are living in jails and mental facilities, having their rights stripped away, having their pleas for help labeled as disruptive behaviors that need to be extinguished, subjected to conditioning, forced to take medications and undergo degrading tests, restrained instead of being heard, and experiencing no relief or acceptance until they deny everything that makes them who they are. But as Bernard Grant once said, the reality is that people who only seem to accept you when you pretend you aren't who you are do not accept you. So today I want to address autistophobia. Like homophobia, the fear of homosexuality, autistophobia is the fear of autism. And like the gay rights movement, I'm challenging the autistophobes, reclaiming my authenticity, reclaiming the labels and stigma and abuse, and demanding equal opportunities and respect despite my differences. And I'm doing it because the autistic community has been pushed more and more into the shadows for the sake of the majority, whether the majority is aware of it or not. And it has already claimed the lives of thousands of autistic people. So what's the risk anyway, right? I have nothing to lose because even death means I would finally be free. It's terrible, and I hope people listen to what I'm saying because this isn't a game. Now let's get into some specifics because I'm sure you're probably thinking you treat everyone the same, and you're probably not guilty of autistophobia. And I understand that is the case for the majority of people, and I hope that's the case for you. So how does autistophobia manifest? Here are 5 ways autistophobia runs rampant in today's society. Masking is a term used to describe the act of hiding your true self, or copying the behaviors of others to camouflage yourself and blend in. Many people see this as a positive behavior, or at least better than being outcast. But differences in opinion and behavior don't automatically mean someone is dangerous or deserving of ridicule, shaming, or shunning. We can all have different opinions and ways of communicating and still get along. After all, diversity is fundamental to ensuring the survival of our species, not its destruction. In fact, it's our resistance to diversity, marriage to tribalism, our refusal to compromise traditions, and a tendency to subjugate differences that has led to countless wars across history. And many of them are still occurring today. And we know the consequences of not masking are dangerous, because there will always be someone there to push us back and put us in place through abuse and institutionalization. But the problems associated with masking are also destructive to the autistic person. So masking is not a real solution. It's codependence. It's bad enough that autistics feel the need to hide our true selves just to avoid being bullied. But when it becomes required as part of our jobs, expected by our partners, family, and friends, the autistic person loses the chance to invest in themselves at all. Without time alone focusing on our special interests, we occupy the rest of our existence creating personas everyone else requires while in their presence. And we end up becoming a jumbled mass of personalities that we hope will get us through every social situation unscathed. Meanwhile, we're chipping away at our own self-worth. And if this is what is expected from us, from everyone, all day, every day, it's easy to see where this leads, but I'll say it anyways. It results in the autistic person feeling worthless, like nobody accepts or loves them for who they are, but only for how they make others feel. And all the while, we are ignoring our own feelings, which most people don't seem to care about. In fact, when we try to be authentic, we are punished for doing so. We are told we are inappropriate, weird, or bad, even when we aren't doing any harm to anyone. This is no exaggeration. When I reported being bullied at work, the HR rep literally told me that I needed to mask more, as if I deserved being treated poorly because I wasn't behaving as a neurotypical. It's another form of victim shaming. But what most people don't understand is the degree to which autistic people are required to mask. We are forced to mask our thoughts, opinions, preferences, speech patterns, physical gestures, coping mechanisms, to deny our own needs and to forsake our identities. And it doesn't matter how benign the autistic behavior we are suppressing. If it's different from the norm, it is automatically misinterpreted by the majority as bad, inappropriate, or weird. A lack of understanding combined with snap judgments like these perpetuates stigma, which can only be countered through education. Acceptance will forever be out of reach as long as the majority lacks the understanding and if we are too afraid to explain it. But this isn't a matter of simply teaching good manners or communication skills. The masks autistics are expected to don are a complete and total replacement of ourselves. What ends up happening over time is we learn that our needs are not as important as other people's needs. We learn that we are broken, difficult, or combative by simply acknowledging our needs. I can remember being taunted and goaded by a classmate during reading time at school in elementary school. And when I couldn't take it anymore, I asked the person to stop kicking me under the table. And that simple act of standing up for myself resulted in me getting an immediate lecture from the teacher, followed by having to stay after school, followed by being grounded at home, followed by a note on my permanent educational record claiming that I was a disruption. And it's situations like this that happen over and over again, accumulating over a lifetime, teaching us that we are not good enough and that our needs, comfort, and rights don't matter. And the bullying never stops, not even when we reach adulthood. Even people professing to be our friends and family will call us names or will participate in teasing us or subjecting us to practical jokes and other means of humiliation. They are never interested in the reasons behind our behavior, just that they have the right to be as cruel as they please because of their misguided perceptions. And this superficiality forces us to mask our autistic traits in order to avoid the ridicule and abuse that we have learned inevitably comes with being identified as different. But masking isn't sustainable. And even those of us who are good at masking still end up being found out. And then all hell breaks loose because everyone else feels betrayed, clutching their pearls as if they are the victims in this twisted dynamic of codependency. It's insane. I've had to come out of the closet many times in my life. And anyone who has come out of the closet knows that you never really stop coming out. You're always meeting new people, and inevitably they make efforts to learn more about you on a personal level. So we learn to walk a tightrope, hiding our true selves, hoping we won't make a single mistake, focusing so intently on our every move that we end up completely dissociating. And much of the time we get by unharmed, but it saps our energy, eats us up from within, and denies us of our right to live authentically. This problem is systemic. And because of the lack of understanding and stigma associated with autism, the lack of real representation in the media, and the overwhelming expectations imposed upon us by abusive neurotypicals, many autistics choose not to be authentic. It's a path that seems easier or safer in the moment. But as someone who did that most of my life, I can tell you that we lose ourselves by constantly denying ourselves without reciprocity or due acknowledgement for our efforts. And the struggle to recover from that decision is so taxing, I honestly and frequently wish for death, because there's nothing I can do to stop the abuse. and it's impossible for me to go back in time and prevent being shamed into denying myself in the first place. If I sound upset, it's because I am, and rightfully so. I harbor a ton of animosity and resentment where my authenticity once was. Masking is unique in that it not only is forced upon us because of the autistophobia we experience from others, but we end up internalizing that autistophobia and believing it ourselves. We even learn to bully ourselves when nobody else is around. It prevents us from ever feeling worthy of love or acceptance. It creates a cycle of abuse that never ends. Masking is just terrible. It's a terrible, horrible thing. And what makes it worse is when it's expected of us. It's a response to trauma we are subjected to day in and day out for our entire lives. Trauma that is held over our heads as a threat if we don't mask. In one way or another, we lose ourselves by either masking or ending our lives prematurely, because why not? We're just a disruption, right? Nobody cares about our experiences. They only care about their own experiences and how we contribute to them. Society seems much happier when we don't exist. And then they wonder why we would ever contemplate suicide and shame us for feeling suicidal. Even the slightest amount of self-awareness and empathy would go a long way towards saving autistics. If that's too much to ask of you, then you are a bigot. Another way autistophobia manifests is in the language we use about autism. Identity-first terminology is preferred by the majority of autistics. An example of identity-first language is saying they are an autistic person, so the autistic identity comes before the person. In the LGBTQ community, it's like saying gay person. However, there are some autistics who prefer person-first language, like person with autism. For many, though, it's as awkward as saying person with gayness. That's just weird. And then there are others who still don't care what language you use in either case. To many, it's just disrespectful to assume the language you want to use overrules the identity of the autistic person. It's like the pronouns controversy many of us are familiar with today. If someone says they want to be referred to as she, her, but you decide to use he, him because you think you have some higher standard, you are being disrespectful. Pardon my language, but it's a dick move and disgusting behavior. The same holds true if you insist on saying person with autism or person living with autism, etc., when they have expressly said that they prefer autistic person. It's not hard. It's a small gesture of respect. And if you don't know what to say, the respectful thing to do is to find out if the autistic person wants to be referred to as an autistic person or a person with autism, and then to honor whatever they say. Not everyone is going to have the same opinion about it, but when you decide not to honor that person's preference, you are being disrespectful no matter how much you want to believe otherwise. Now, this is a free country, and we have the right to free speech. So it's your right to disagree and do what you want. But know that such a stance is not about respecting the autistic person. It's about being stubborn and disregarding the other person. You are being a bigot. Many autistic people find person-first language like people with autism, people who have autism, or people dealing with or living with or experiencing autism to be quite demeaning. You may think it's more respectful to use person-first language because it separates the person from autism, placing more importance on the person part because their autism shouldn't define them. But there is no way to separate the person from their autism. The two are fully intertwined. It's not thoughtful, it's arrogant, dismissive, and selfish because it focuses on making the bigot more comfortable by imagining a normal person at the core who they can relate to but is plagued by autism. What's worse is this type of language is perpetuated by parents of autistic children who want their child to be treated normal, or who haven't accepted their child is autistic but would rather believe they have a tragic disorder. These are the same type of parents who believe their child will one day recover from autism and they'll have the non-autistic child that they always wanted. Truth is, they are unaccepting of their child. That's not respectful or honorable. That's disgusting. It's also offensive to use functioning labels such as high functioning or low functioning, or to try and reframe our disability as a superpower. Dismissing reality denies us of the support we need. It doesn't make us stronger. We are already pretending to be someone we're not just to make you comfortable. So saying we have a superpower is not only dismissive, but now it comes with the requirement that we need to be of a savant of some kind or provide some additional entertainment value before you will accept us. Get bent. Autism isn't something we can turn on or off at will. And even though some of us have the ability to appear normal, it's not a sign of how well we are actually functioning. It's a response to trauma because we are beaten and bullied when we show the slightest sign of being autistic. I understand that when neurotypicals say you are very high functioning, it's meant as a compliment or gesture of respect, as if they're saying, "You're okay in my book." But it's actually quite disrespectful and condescending. It's saying that we're okay as long as we appear to be normal, or as long as we don't ask anything of you. It's saying that autistics are a lower class of people, but you're somehow being generous and supportive by downplaying our struggles. It's absolving yourself from having to take any responsibility when we aren't functioning at our best, and releasing you from any obligation to help because we should be able to function at the same level all the time, no matter what. The reality is that autistics outperform allistics in the workplace by 140%, all while pretending our own needs don't matter and pretending we are just like you so you feel most at ease. And as a result, we burn out quickly, more often, and for longer periods. Functioning labels set an expectation that when we fall short, you have the right to punish us for experiencing mental illness. And what do our efforts grant us? We are the ones being passed up for promotions. First, to be laid off. And we can't pass an interview without hiding our true selves. The truth is, no matter how I may appear to be functioning on the outside, I'm usually barely functioning on the inside. And I know that I can't share that with you or be authentic with you about my struggles because of the shame and rejection you will put upon me if I do. I'm not always going to be able to function to the same level every day. Some days I don't have the energy to shower or brush my teeth. Sometimes I don't have the energy to get out of bed. So don't place me on a pedestal of unrealistic expectations. I can't stand there forever. Autistics are stereotyped as being naive, gullible, or childlike, which baffles me. I'm a smart guy. I have a higher than average IQ. I've achieved greatness in many ways throughout my life. But you want to tell me that I'm naive for taking you at your word? That I shouldn't trust you or what you say? That it's my fault for believing your lies? Naive is just another label people use to shift the blame from the liar to the victim. Unfortunately, it's often a word used when we are being infantilized or treated as a child. It's a way for someone to push us down so they can feel superior. My last manager would infantilize me all the time, telling me that anything I did that she didn't approve of or didn't understand was inappropriate. Although she prided herself in being a good communicator, she would publicly humiliate me, was often dismissive, deliberately cruel, and showed she only had a superficial understanding of most matters. It was a passive-aggressive way of forcing her dominance over me, an attempt to control me, and a way to absolve herself from any responsibility of providing support. The term inappropriate is historically used to describe autistic behaviors, but such a generic term does nothing to actually help the autistic person understand why or how their actions should have been different. It's used more by people who don't understand and would rather shut the other person down than actually learn something. Your readiness to label our behavior and your inability to explain your preferences, no matter how confidently and assertively stated, is another sign that you are being discriminatory. And bigotry is as bigotry does. The final example I want to discuss is related to the idea that autism is something to be fixed or cured. For starters, it is not a mental illness. We may be prone to more mental illnesses because of how we are treated by society and the expectations society places upon us, but autism is not a mental illness. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means we have a different type of brain. You can't just change the brain and expect that to be a cure. And while I appreciate attempts to understand autism on a deeper level, the answer is not to go down the road to eugenics, which is a method of choosing desirable characteristics for your child to inherit. If you ever saw the 1997 movie Gattaca, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, it's a fabulous movie all about eugenics, and I highly recommend it. But the danger is that you are attempting to classify humans, further marginalizing those of us who don't meet some arbitrary standard. And while that movie is a fictional imagining of a dystopian near future, the reality is that steps are already being taken to get us there. Anti-vaxxers frequently blame vaccines for causing autism, which is completely untrue. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that impacts brain development, which starts in the womb. It's not something that you can catch or develop later on in life. And yet the misinformation has stopped people from getting life-saving vaccinations. This not only impacts themselves, but also the collective population by creating holes in what is called herd immunity, which is a way to describe the security that comes with mass immunity within a community. The more immunity, the fewer options for opportunistic infections to take hold. The fear of somehow catching autism keeps millions of people from obtaining necessary immunities, exposing their communities to dangerous diseases, and increasing the risk of more people getting sick and dying. On the other hand, there are people who believe you can cure autism through medication. So the exact opposite. My own sister suggested that I take a random drug promoted by a random nut job on the internet who convinced people that she found an injectable cure. My sister's ignorance and hatred of my condition was great enough to suggest, with great confidence, that I should risk my life in pursuit of a cure because that would be better than accepting my autism. The sheer irresponsibility of the woman selling these fake cures is audacious on its own. But the danger she places upon people by preying on their desperation is pure evil. Who knows what those vials actually contained? It could have just been water, or it could have been some mix of deadly toxins. Either way, people were injecting it into their own bodies, and the bodies of their children, hoping for a miracle cure that doesn't exist. And the risk of losing their lives or the lives of their children or loved ones was worth the gamble because of their fundamental misunderstanding and hatred of autism. I don't talk to that sister anymore. Not because of this alone, but this was just the final straw. And if you think I may be blowing things out of proportion, you can do a quick search on Google, and you'll see there are tons of sites suggesting that proper nutrition, exercise, and avoidance of smoking, alcohol, and harmful substances, something any pregnant person would do to ensure that they have a healthy pregnancy, can somehow reduce the risk of having a child with autism, further suggesting that autism is somehow linked to a poor diet, lack of exercise, smoking, or whatever while pregnant. And while most sites admit there is no way to prevent autism, they still suggest good health practices as preventive methods. Even the National Institute of Health, NIH, their site suggests measures that can be taken to prevent the incidence of autism, which is false. They already stated there is nothing that can be done to prevent it. So to then list ways of how to prevent autism right after that is just completely dishonest. Some organizations try to offer false hope, such as the Mayo Clinic site, which suggests some children may outgrow autism, which is also false. Autism is lifelong. Supposed autistic advocacy groups promote ABA therapy as a solution if all else fails and you end up with an autistic child, claiming it can lessen challenging behavior. But silencing and controlling children is not evidence that you've treated autism. And as recently as 2019, when they passed the Autism Cares Act, the US government was focused on researching ways to prevent autism. While passage of this act is progress, most people aren't even going to know it exists, despite the fact that we live in a time when it's easier to spread information than ever before. So it's not out of the ballpark to be concerned about the possibility of autism eugenics gaining traction. There's already a widespread misconception that 1, the neurotypical way of living is somehow superior, 2, that autism can be treated or cured, 3, that measures can be taken to prevent autism or lessen its severity, and 4, that the challenges posed to parents of autistic children are of greater concern than trying to meet the needs of their children. This is not only a slippery slope that leads to eugenics, but we are already on that slope. Autism is nothing to fear, though. It's simply a variation on the human brain, and we should not be trying to eradicate it from existence. Without autism, we wouldn't have the notable work of Dan Aykroyd, Daryl Hannah, Albert Einstein, Sir Anthony Hopkins, Tim Burton, Bill Gates, Emily Dickinson, Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Beethoven, Mozart, Temple Grandin, Greta Thunberg, Hannah Gatsby, and more. And the fact that parents and supposed autistic advocacy groups like Autism Speaks have been the biggest drivers pushing for a cure or preventive measures is the most disgusting part of all of this. They compare autism to AIDS, blame marriage struggles and bankruptcy on autism, and compare it to some evil monster lurking in the dark. how autistic do you have to be to wish your child was never born? Because that's what you're saying if you are pushing for a cure. If they had a different brain, they'd be a different person. If your child is autistic, but you prefer to see them as a normal child struggling with autism, you are in denial. And if you only accept specific cherry-picked parts of your child, you are a bigot. I know this isn't easy to hear, but it needs to be said. The neurotypical world is not the pinnacle of what humanity can be. And despite the fact that much of humanity's progress can be attributed to autistics throughout history, we are still 7 to 9 times more likely to commit suicide. In fact, suicide is the #1 killer of autistics, and we are dying roughly 20 years before everyone else. This isn't because we suffer from autism. It's because of how little acceptance we receive and the abuse we endure from a society that refuses to accept us. Stigma and autistophobia are out of control and unjustified. It's time society stopped pretending to be accepting and start actually accepting us as fellow human beings. Hiding our autistic traits may make life better for the majority because ignorance is bliss, but it does the autistic person no good. It has not been working for autistics. The only way we are ever going to be accepted is if we come out of the shadows, step into the light, and become unapologetically honest about who we are. Becoming visible and forcing people to see us for who we really are is the only way to cut through the fear rooted in the stigma. This world doesn't have to be so hostile against us. But trying to live up to the twisted ideas that abusive neurotypicals have about us in their heads is only hurting people. So it's up to us all to fight for the change that we need. It's not about black and white thinking. It's about accepting the many different variations of human expression. Don't fear what you don't understand. Learn about it. Educate yourself. And if you're an autistic adult, please consider being open and honest about it. Of course, don't put yourself in harm's way, but ask yourself why you should be denied authenticity in your life simply because some neurotypicals don't want to face the fact that their ideas about us are fundamentally flawed. We have to show the world that life is not about becoming carbon copies of each other or constantly trying to dominate people who are different. But that diversity and compromise will get us so much further. We have to show the world that there's no one-size-fits-all standard way to express ourselves. We have to show the world that the false dichotomy of good people do X and bad people do Y is harmful. We have to stand up for our rights because we're being pushed into the margins and our rights are being stripped away from us continually. Because autistic people have just as much right to exist as anyone else, and our existence is not a threat to anyone. Autism isn't a choice, but autistophobia is. And we can choose to be better. I hope you'll join me in that effort. If you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, and subscribe to see more content like this. Or click on the video here to continue watching.